I'm a big fan of Tomb Kings, and I always have been. They're an awesome army that has honestly, in my opinion, been one of Games Workshop's best. Some of their models are at this point quite dated, including Skeleton Warriors, but hopefully we'll be getting some more of those with Old World. And speaking of Old World, we'll probably be getting quite a lot of new players. So, for all of you new players out there, this video is a sort of introduction to a couple of the main colour schemes that the Tomb Kings had, and how to do them. So just sit back, relax and enjoy. Now, no matter what Tomb King army you pick, bone is going to be one of the staples of your scheme. So we're going to start off, before we even get to it, by cleaning up the models. Now, some of these old Skeleton Warriors have some pretty egregious mold lines, so I've done my best to clear them off, but you may still miss a couple. I'd also highly recommend leaving the shields separate for the painting stages. They block off a lot of detail being so big. Now, one of the unfortunate things about the old Tomb King kit is that it just shared most things with the normal skeleton kits, and so you get a lot of weapons that don't look particularly Tomb King-ish. And mine here have spears, but if you are going for the bladed variety, then cutting off the bottoms of your axes like this makes them look a heck of a lot more like traditional Egyptian axes. Now, once everyone is cleared up, I'm going to blue tack them to whatever you can and prime them. I chose Zandri Dust because it's going to give us a good base. Now I'm going to start off by dry brushing everything with Ushabti Bone. This is going to give us a nice highlight, and then I'm going to do a just top down with Screaming Skull, which is going to add in a bit of some zenithal lighting. And you can see we've already got a perfectly decent army standard bone. The armies of Khemri are the forces of Settra the Imperishable, named after his capital city. The colour scheme is all blue, gold and red, and so we're going to start off with the gold by painting in the headband, the spearhead, all of that jazz, with Balthazar gold, which is going to give us a nice starting point. Then we're going to cover the back of the shield with the Wildwood contrast paint, which is going to be perfectly adequate for our needs. Then we're going to paint in the front of the shield with Thousand Suns blue, which is a very Egyptian blue, but this is where the fun begins, because we're going to use Old Formula Drakenhof Nightshade. You can probably find some equivalent with a mix of the new one and Pterodon Turquoise Leviathan blue. I'm not too familiar, but we're going to use this to build up from the bottom edge, beginning to make that bottom edge darker, and coming in multiple layers, and also eventually just with an almost completely clean damp brush going along the boundary between our first layer and the normal bit. We're just going to make it a subtle but still visible gradient from a lighter blue to a dark blue. Just going to add a lot of visual interest for this big colour spot. We're now going to cover all of the metal parts of the shield with Balthazar gold. We're then going to paint in these side flaps on the headdress with Mephiston red, and also this spear shaft. It is quite bright, but don't worry, we'll be darkening it down in just a second. We're going to come in with Agrax Earthshade and cover all of those red bits, as well as dotting in some of the eyes, just to make them a little bit darker, add a bit of contrast. We're also going to cover this on the metal areas, just focusing it around the rivets on the shield and in some of the eye sockets of the skulls. But on the spearhead we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to focus this just towards this opposing sides of the spear, a little bit like you would in non-metallic metal. Now is for a little bit of a complex part. We're going to do some freehand. Now, freehand on Tomb Kings can really be absolutely whatever you want. Take some of these other models I've done, for example. If you're not really into doing freehand, then you don't have to. I remember there being some quite good Scarab transfers in one of the Horus Heresy sets for Thousand Suns, so you can use those if you want to. If you want to draw it on like me, I used Ulthuth Grey to sketch it out, and then White Scar for the final details. I then glued on some sand, added a base rim, and all that was left to do from here was to glue on the shield, and then we had our first Khemri warrior. So, Warriors of the Crimson King of Numas. They appeared in a White Dwarf article, and that's the scheme that I'll be following here. I'm going to start off by changing the bone a little bit, and so I'm covering both the bone areas and the back of the shield with Nuln Oil first to start darkening things down. I'm then going to give the skeleton a dry brush of Dawnstone. Then we're going to give a top down with Ulthothan Grey, just like we did with the Screaming Skull. Just going to make it a sort of bit darker and grimier than our other skeletons. Once that's done, we're going to start on the wood. I'm using a 50-50 mix of Black Templar and Wildwood here to paint in the back of the shield for continuing that sort of dark theme. Then going to use that same mixture on the shaft of the spear. Then going to paint in the sort of main shield colour with Corn Red, which is quite bright at first, but it does dry darker. I'm also going to put this into the sort of dip between the bands of the headdress. I'm then going to paint in one half of the shield with black. The Crimson King of Numas actually alternated between sort of black and red, white and red, or any combination of those, as you can see in the codex, and this can help to add some variety, even if you don't want to do some freehand. I then painted in the trim of the shield with a mix of 50-50 Balthazar Gold and Iron Warrior to create more of that sort of dark, desaturated look. Next I came in with Nuln Oil and started washing the metallics. I did the same 50-50 treatment with the spearhead, and then I went straight on to adding some freehand. Now it's worth noting, also some of these shields can be a bit bare, so make sure to add the Nuln Oil in any sort of dips and dings within the armor's surface. I started painting on a snake and then a big sort of wing shape coming out of the side of the skull, which seems to be relatively prevalent in the sort of Numas iconography, which left me with this quite nice looking freehand. Next I painted in the sort of flaps on the headdress with Abaddon Black, and then gave that the same colour as the base rim. After gluing on the shield, there was nothing else to do. Okay, so the Chosen of Usirian don't really exist. This is a scheme predominantly of my own creation, but it is still heavily based on this picture in the Tomb King's Codex. As you can see, my Tomb Guard are painted almost exactly like that. However, there was never a scheme for the Legionaries or anything else, so this is my own creation. The idea behind these guys being that they're these particularly devout followers of this ominous god of the dead, Usirian. Now, here we're going to start off by painting in the red details like the shaft of the spear and the sides of the headdress with Corn Red. We're then going to start off by painting the back of the shield with Wildwood, and then the front of the shield with Rakarth Flesh, which is quite a thin paint, so you may need 2 coats to get this solid. Then I added some more small freehand, and then we're going to do something a bit similar to what we did on the Khemri shield, only this time it's with thinned mix of either old Agrax Earthshade or new Agrax Earthshade and Wildwood contrast paint. We're going to lay this up, sort of coming up from the bottom and also coming down from the top like streaks, just general grime, but following the same steps we did in the Khemri part. We're then going to paint the metal, all but the spearhead, with this dark Warplock bronze. Then we're going to paint the spearhead with Balthazar Gold. Then using Agrax Earthshade to wash in much the same way we have before on the spearhead and all over the dark metal areas, we're pretty close to being finished. All we need to do now is paint on some very blurry highlights with Balthazar Gold, and then give it a black base rim. Now you may have thought I'd be done after gluing on the shields, but I realised that the bone was just a little bit too bright. So I gave the bone an all-over wash with Agrax Earthshade to darken it down. And so there we have it, 3 distinct Tomb King colour schemes. I hope this video has showed you some techniques that you can use in your own schemes, or given you something to follow along with as you prepare your armies to do battle for Nehekara. Bye for now.